Good evening and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of the 30th of July. Before we move into the formal agenda, just a couple of issues I wanted to raise this evening. Of course, all of our thoughts tonight go out to the community of Southport. What we've seen over the last 24 hours is shocking and clearly a community will need time to come to terms with that. So we send them all of our love and solidarity at this point. And it makes us reflect back pretty quickly on the circumstances we had in our own community just last week. I want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to both Kent Police and the Army and the Royal Engineers in particular, as well as Medway Council staff. I'd highlight Ruth DeLue, who was present at a community meeting with myself and Lauren Edwards as MP for Rochester and Stroud, where we were able to give good reassurance, community reassurance at that point. So I know there's been further correspondence, and obviously there is an ongoing legal case, so we can't talk about it in much detail tonight, but I would want to put on record my thanks to those partners. And actually, the residents at that meeting were wanting to particularly recognise CCAM as well and their staff who obviously took some immediate action on the day in question. On a slightly different note, today has seen Medway strike gold. So I'm sure on behalf of not only Medway Council but the whole of Medway, we want to say a huge congratulations to Nathan Hales. Outstanding performance, bringing home the gold, truly putting Medway on that international map. And if you look at the Team GB website, I'd encourage people to do so. It's very clear he is from Medway. That's on there. So we look forward to welcoming Nathan back home, and I'm sure we'll make some arrangements accordingly for us as a council to congratulate him in his brilliant efforts. And there continues to be other Medway representatives in other sports as we go across, and hopefully we'll see more golds coming forward. I've got apologies for absence tonight from Tracy and Adam. Harinda is running late, but will join us later. Are colleagues happy for me to sign the record of decisions of the 9th of July? Thank you. Item 3, declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other significant interests. Are there any? I'm not being made aware of any, so I don't think so. That's fine, thank you. Let's move on then to the first substantive item, which is, in my name, the Cost of Living Crisis Response Plan 24-25. And I'm very, very proud to be bringing this to Cabinet. Colleagues will recall that on the first working day after we won the election last year, I was privileged, along with more than 20 other Labour leaders, to meet with, at that point, Her Majesty's Leader of the Opposition, who is now His Majesty's Prime Minister. And he was very, very clear in saying that we wanted to see a cost of living plan for all communities across the country, because we knew at the time how much of an impact it was for communities like Medway. So we were very, very pleased to take on that challenge. It's something which we reflected upon quickly as a cabinet, and actually the plan came forward well within our first 100 days. Roll forward 12 months, and we then see the update that we have in front of us today. And I want to pay particular tribute to Gemma Gilly and her team, who's done a tremendous amount of work on this, working with our comms team and other parts of the council to ensure it is updated. Of course, we've had to take some difficult decisions as a council, so some things that were in there last year aren't in there this year. And there is a recognition as well that at this stage there are some things which are funded, which throughout this year ahead, there isn't absolute clarity as to their future. And of course, we'll look carefully as we go through the year for updates accordingly. It will probably be a more live document than this time last year. We made a couple of proposals, those were put in place, and actually there's been a number of really good examples where sometimes a small amount of money being spent through this process has actually led to quite big savings, either sometimes for us or indeed other partners. And I think that's a good thing to see, as well as ultimately making sure those individuals and families get the support they need at the time they need. So very, very pleased to bring this forward. There is obviously a recommendation in there around delegated authority. For the avoidance of doubt, we will spend every penny of grant funding we have. We'll spend it wisely. I think this administration, along with our very hard-working officers, have got a good track record of that, and we'll continue to do that, particularly with the elements laid out in this plan. Happy to pause at that point, take any questions, comments from colleagues. Teresa, please.
A bit late. Can I add my condolences to the family and everyone in the community after last week's events, and my thanks as well to all of the people who've helped and the fantastic spirit that the community have shown, which has been mentioned to me actually by people from outside the area. And of course, congratulations absolutely to Nathan. I want to add my thanks to Jen McGilly's team and share with Cabinet some really good feedback that I've had through the voluntary sector and directly from people who've benefited about our relatively new financial advice team. People really appreciate that friendly face of the council and the ability to come here and get their impartial advice and access quickly to anything that can help people get through what is still, despite our new government, a rough time. And I think, yesterday we heard the challenges the government face on a macro scale, much like the challenges we faced taking over as a Labour administration last year, picking up on what happened here with a Conservative administration, turning over the stones, working with our officers, looking very closely at everything, bringing in independent finance audits. That's happening now at government level, and a casualty of the past administration in government, I'm afraid, has been the winter fuel allowance for some pensioners, but not the poorest. So I say to everybody watching and to Cabinet around the table, and all of our officers, we've got to do our very best to make sure that those people who are entitled to a pension credit, 1 million people who don't claim it but are entitled, are able to get it and work jointly with our colleagues in the council, with the DWP, to make sure that those people in Medway entitled to that benefit get their fair share. There will be better times. Just now, we're sorting things out, and I think it's important for us to be frank about it, play our part in supporting the government as they get to grips with the challenges and make sure that people in Medway know we're on their side.
Thank you very much. Teresa, any other? Simon, I think, yes.
Yeah, thanks very much. And thank you very much to the officers teams who put this together. This is incredibly important. It's often, we've heard mention about the sad situation that happened last week and again in Southport, and those events can overtake the media alongside the happier stuff like the Olympics and other stuff that's going on. But underlying that, day after day, is that grinding poverty that we've seen in so many of our communities, and the result of a government that just lost control of the finances generally. And we still are living with that, despite the excitement of winning elections and stuff and being able to do things that we want to do. As a new authority here in Medway, just over a year old, and a new government coming in, there is still the underlying issues that we have to tackle. And that is day after day for a lot of residents in my own ward in Luton. It's a particular issue for my community. So it really is helpful that this is now coming out, and it's brilliant to see it. And I think the key elements in there are about partnership. Medway Council cannot do this on its own. It has to work in partnership across the whole community, something that we're all passionate about, that we want to bring everybody together to work on these issues. And it's also something that, it focuses to a certain extent on the urgent issues, where we have to step in almost immediately, and the ability for the people in need to communicate effectively as quickly as possible when they are in urgent need. But also the underlying long-term issues have to be dealt with as well. So this is a 24-25 plan, but there will be a 25-26 and it will go on whilst we keep having the problems that we have to address. This is a sort of one of those forever projects that we will not give up on now that we've started the process. So really welcome this, a great piece of work by the officer teams behind it. and thanks for bringing it in. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Any other colleague? If not, I'll make some closing remarks. Thanks to both Teresa and Simon for their recognition of the brilliant work done by Gemma and the team, and also the wider implications of this. Simon, you are absolutely right. There will always be the need to help the most needy in society, which is where Teresa is right to highlight, in the same way that we had to take some tough decisions after more than a decade, or more than 2 decades, I should say, in our case, of Conservative administration. Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner and others are having to make some difficult choices very early on as well. And that's the right thing to do. That's responsible government. So I understand why they're having to take those decisions, and they won't be decisions they're taking lightly. When it comes to helping those most in need, one of the good things that we've done is actually invest in some tech infrastructure as well. So actually that's money we spent last year that which we're continuing to make good use of, and actually it picks up exactly on the point that Teresa quite rightfully makes. There is a job of work for us to do as a council, working with our voluntary sector partners, with the DWP and others, to ensure that we say, if you are entitled to pension credit, you should be claiming it. It's not charity, it's not a handout. We have a welfare state for a reason, and we need to encourage people as much as we can between now and the kind of winter period that we'll move into to sign up. And I'm sure colleagues in their advice surgeries through Medway Matters and other correspondence will be doing everything we can to encourage those individuals to get the support they need. On that basis, happy to move the recommendations. Are those agreed? Thank you. Let's move on then to agenda item 5, revenue budget monitoring round 1, and recommendations laid out in paragraph 1. This is a difficult read, and it's worth recognising that we're in a challenging place. This continues to be a resource-hungry organisation because of the challenges we have, not because we are wasteful or spending money on vanity projects. The complete opposite of that. SITFA, when they came in at the end of last year, were very, very clear. This is a well-run organisation with too much pressures and not enough pennies to pay for those pressures. So we are in a situation at the end of round 1 where we are looking at some financial challenges. It's worth recognising that, and people can read the narratives in the individual parts of the council, and some colleagues may wish to comment in their particular areas, absolutely would welcome that. I think in particular for me, I recognise that some of the challenges are systemic. So actually in the care sector, whether that's adults or children's, that is an issue which is far bigger than just Medway Council. And we'll need to see over the lifetime of this Parliament, I would hope to see good progress made on that. Again, it won't be as quick probably as we would desire because of the financial pressures that the government has, but we will always put Medway first, be putting the arguments for Medway. And for example, for adult social care, I know Teresa will be doing everything she can, both formal lobbying as well as through the LGA and other areas. So work continues. We've submitted, as required, our productivity plan. That's gone in. We look forward to hopefully having a discussion with the Minister about that. That would be welcome. Of course, we've still got the some unknowns around EFS, some questions which have been left unanswered about interest rates, etc., from the previous government. So again, hopefully we'll see some progress made there. And those things are important because actually the interest we're paying has a direct impact onto the revenue budget this year, next year, and as we move forward. So rest assured, I know that Cabinet members are working hard with their senior teams. We've already started the conversations around next year's budget as well. Those have started earlier than ever before because we've got the double challenge of resolving these financial challenges for this year, but also at the same time recognising that February is only a few months away where we'll have to set next year's budget, which will have the backdrop that we have. So I'll pause there. Happy to take comments from colleagues. Teresa, please.
Thank you, Vince, and I think absolute thanks to our council officers who've been working really hard since we set the budget to achieve some of those savings, and indeed, despite in our division in social care and public health, despite an £11 million pressure, some savings have been achieved, and I want to celebrate those tonight. We've seen a saving from our new piece of technology, Lily, of nearly £300,000. That tells us that the investment in assistive technology to help people stay independent for longer and to monitor their well-being has got the potential to work and to achieve those savings. We're about to see what a virtual house looks like when we've fully teched up, keeping people safe and independent. And I want to remind everybody that the staff have been making these savings and doing renewed, more intensive budget monitoring at our instigation when nothing has stopped coming through the door. So those pressures are, where are the pressures coming from? They are coming from us, our community, all the people that we know who are getting older and need more care, and for those people whose life has changed in different ways, been unfortunate enough to be ill, become disabled, and for younger people coming through who've got lifetime needs. You know, I will always say, when people say talk about the community, I say, who are you talking about? You are talking about us. There but for the grace go I and everybody around this table and everybody that we know who is well at the moment. So we've got to make sure that we're modernising, that we're doing all of these things, but it is not anyone's fault that that pressure is coming through the door. They're doing as much as they possibly can to change ways of working, to think about how we can modernise, to ask the community what they want. You know, that goes on every single day when a social worker goes to someone's house and does an assessment and talks to our colleagues in housing about what we might need. And this is a really good time to be talking about this because we've got the consultation on the local plan, and through that we should be delivering the things we need for the future to keep our community safe and well and enable people to have lifetime housing that they can downsize to and change as life changes for them. So I don't feel pessimistic about this, I feel optimistic. It is challenging, but I don't want people to feel that the problems are insurmountable. We have already found some solutions and people are starting to work on them. It will take time, but I think with comradely patience and support for one another, we will get there.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Luella, please.
Thank you, Vince. Included here is the continuing pressure, projected pressure for temporary accommodation numbers as people continue to present to us, and those numbers are remaining high. Good progress has been made by officers for the programme of purchasing the council temporary accommodation stock, and I just wanted to highlight that those pressures that we feel locally, and I'm sure across the country, were highlighted today by my predecessor, Nushaba Khan, MP in Parliament, when she asked a question today surrounding the pressures on local authorities. We're all facing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luella. Any other colleague on this item? Thank you for raising that. I mean, certainly it was great to see Nushaba literally shoulder to shoulder with Tris and Lauren in the chamber, and fantastic to hear, I think, the first formal intervention in Parliament from one of our three new MPs on an issue which we know is directly impacting both our finances but also the quality of life for residents, some of those sometimes the most vulnerable residents that we have. So it's great to hear our MPs taking up the cause, not just for Medway, but actually for local government as a whole. So, and I'm sure there'll be many, many more interventions like that by our three MPs. So thank you for raising that. And again, I know, like lots of projects, you know, allocating funding to deal with the issue doesn't mean that the following day the issue is dealt with, but progress is being made. And that, of course, with the additional kind of permissions given at the last meeting, that gives that ability to be more fluid and agile when opportunities come up for us. So thank you for your leadership taking over from Nushaba's equally fantastic leadership. Teresa, you are right to highlight, although this is a difficult situation that we find ourselves in for Q1, we are making some good progress in some places. And similar to the point around temporary accommodation, on adult social care, any upper tier authority will be struggling with that. There are more cases, they are more complex, and I say we will need to see progress made at a national level, certainly across England and Wales, as soon as practically possible. And it's worth just finally saying before we move to the vote on this is not an easy set of circumstances we inherited. We know that. We know, as is well documented, the 91% cut we had in revenue support grant since 2010. Those are the challenges which, although we're in a new financial year, the challenges remain the same, and the cuts for the previous 14 years remain the same as well. So we will continue working hard. I've got every confidence that the team of 25, Richard Hicks's excellent team of corporate management and our team of cabinet are working closely to come up with innovation, new ideas, use of technology wherever practically possible as well, and we'll talk a bit more about that on another item later on. On that basis, colleagues, are you happy to agree the recommendations as laid out in paragraph 1? Thank you. Let's move on to the next item, which is the other side of the budget, the capital budget monitoring on page 39. Again, recommendations laid out in paragraph 1, including in particular, and I'll spend 30 seconds on this, environment of £500,000. There was an underspend on a secondary school project, and there's another secondary school project which has roughly the same overspend, so we're just moving the money from one secondary school to another. So again, within the education capital programme, and I think that's certainly to be sensibly moved at that point. We continue to have, despite the previous government's withdrawal of £170 million, a wide and deep capital programme, some of which is very visual, things like the paddock, which I think will be open before we meet again as a cabinet, but also many, many other things that have been well documented in the press, you know, the upcoming SEND schools, school provision, and as again the report lays out a number of areas where we're making progress, of course including a whole new school in Gillingham, which is to be very much welcomed. Again, another way of, you know, investing to try and not only give better outcomes for our young people and their families, but also a better outcome for taxpayers, a genuine win-win. So the information's there. Happy to take questions or comments from colleagues as they may feel appropriate. Thank you. Hand over to colleagues. Simon, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Vincent. Thank you for this report. Obviously, there's a huge amount of work going on throughout the whole capital programme. And some things we just had no choice. And I just wanted to pick out in the frontline services the waste fleet issue. That was an additional £17 million that we weren't expecting when we first came in last year. It was an issue that had been left hanging in the air for a number of years and should have really been resolved, but wasn't. And now we're doing that. The vehicles, I think the new vehicles are due to arrive beginning of next year. So that's something that, and that's a lot of hard work has gone into making this happen. It's coming in below budget as well from the original figures, so it's really good news on that as well. Again, thanks to the officers really putting a lot of energy into this and making it happen. It's also part of a wider waste strategy which will gradually reduce the volumes of waste that we produce in Medway, which is so important for our environmental footprint. So in some of these bad news stories, there's some good that can come out of it in terms of how we manage and how we take these capital programs forward. So there's always a silver lining, and we're working hard to make sure that happens. So I just thought I'd highlight that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Teresa?
I think despite the gloom that we've had to express when we were looking at the revenue budget, there is some really good news here. There's something for everyone and some real innovation and things that are going to be quite transformational, or everything that's going on in the centre of Chatham. We can all see how well the paddock is shaping up, and I commend you, Simon, again for your insistence that the planting there is of native plants and that they're very carefully planned. Even though the area is not finished, it's looking really nice, and changing the feel for people waiting at the bus station and coming out of the Pentagon. A huge amount for schools. I know Tracy and Adam have been very closely associated with those improvements that are going on, making the new term a better start for lots of people. There are improvements at our children and family hubs as well, much needed, particularly with the sensory spaces for anybody who's on the waiting list for a neurodiversity assessment. There are things that we're doing and places that people can go to give families support and comfort that as the children go forward, that there are things that can help them even before an assessment takes place. And as I did at full council, can I welcome again and formally thank our partners in health for the great news that work has started on the Healthy Living Centre in the Pentagon, one of our most deprived areas in terms of health inequality, a fantastic project that's going to help us with GP appointments, motivate the health community. I think that new facilities are coming here, and the very welcome news from everybody involved that it's going to be called the James Williams Healthy Living Centre in memory of our amazing and still very sadly missed Director of Public Health. So I think, you know, we can look forward to the way that those capital projects will enhance life for people in Medway and improve our economy too, because they will drive up more jobs and, you know, getting investors interested in this area.
Thank you. Any other colleague? No, I think before we move to the vote, a couple of final things on this. Absolutely wholeheartedly agree with Teresa. The news around the Healthy Living Centre, the James Williams Healthy Living Centre, I can't say that enough. It has been a long wait coming, and look, I'll be the first to say that project started before our administration. No problem with saying that at all. I welcome the fact it's getting finished under our administration and not a day too soon. And I think certainly I want to recognise the great news that the waste fleet, which should have been dealt with in a different way. If you leave everything till it's broken, you end up having to take some pretty tough decisions quickly. That project's going to come in under budget. And of course, that won't be the only capital project coming in under budget. Since, of course, the last time we met as a cabinet, we were really pleased to be able to show another project that came in under budget, which was the opening of Cossington Park Sports Centre. Nobody gets fined if you call it splashes, that's okay. And I was, you know, thank you, Nina. I think you shared some really positive feedback from a resident who was there with someone who had quite severe mobility issues, who found it incredibly accessible. So really, really proud that not only are we getting lots of people joining up, but actually the feedback's been tremendous. So thank you for your work on that, and Harinder, and obviously Nashaba in her previous portfolio as property. So on that basis, with the recommendations as laid out in paragraph 1, are colleagues happy to agree those? Thank you. Let's move on. So it's a bit finance heavy, but that's good. So if we've got no money, we can't spend it, and we are spending it wisely, as we say. This is our Treasury Management Outturn report. Recommendations are to note the comments made by Audit Committee and note the Treasury Management Outturn annual report. Worth saying before we move to the detail, and I won't go into absolute detail because, again, Audit Committee do a fantastic job on this. We did receive a letter today from the Minister, Jim McMahon, regarding audit. As colleagues will probably be aware, there has been a national problem for a number of years from the perspective of audit. Not unique to local government. As most colleagues will know, I sit on Kent Fire and Rescue. They've had similar problems as well. There's been a bit of a recruitment issue in the world of auditing. That's been part of the problem. So we've now got a clear roadmap as to how do we get back to a position of where we should be. So I'm grateful for that, and I've shared that, of course, with Chief Operating Officer and our Chair of Audit as well, and I know they'll look carefully at that. The Treasury Management Report for the previous financial year shows, again, the challenging circumstances we find ourselves in. Worth recognising, and we have spoken about this a couple of times at this meeting, the issue around some of our external portfolio, and in particular there was one scheme, the Lothbury scheme, which in the last financial year ran into difficulty. I think we took the right decision on that, and we took advice and guidance as we always would. There was, and I say this, he's not dead, but in missing Tris, he would want me to talk about Lobos as well. One of the Lobo lenders took their option last year. We didn't know whether there would be a lot more. There hasn't been. So, of course, we keep a close eye on that through the relevant officers and indeed through audit as well. I'll probably leave it at that point. I say I draw colleagues' attention and the wider public's attention to the comments in paragraph 12, which is where audit committee take some considerable time and do a really good job on a cross-party basis of looking at this in the level of detail that you would expect. So again, my thanks to them. Happy to throw it open to comments at that point. If there are none, which is absolutely fine, happy to therefore move the recommendations as laid out in paragraph 1. Are those agreed? Agreed. Thank you. That moves us on to item 8, the Medway 2.0 roadmap, and I'm going to hand the floor over to Alex. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, I come to Cabinet standing on the shoulders of giants who have come before and taking all the credit for work which has happened before I took over the portfolio, but particularly I'd like to pay tribute to the work of Paul Boyd and his team who have sort of really gripped this concept of Medway 2.0, which he is always at pains to point out is not a new version of a computer system or anything that basic. It's a much more fundamental rethink of how we do everything as a council, and more importantly, how we do everything as a council for residents. So putting residents absolutely at the heart of what we do, and recognising that I think as has happened in a lot of sectors and certainly a lot of public sector organisations, the sort of process of moving to a digital world has happened in a piecemeal way. And you know, as we log on to Spotify these days, you know, it's hard to imagine the days of MySpace pages and all the great things that happened there, or you know, to look at Facebook as perhaps the sort of modern successor to Friends Reunited, and that just underlines the fact that as different services the council offered became suitable to become digital, that happened at its own pace. Each service would sort of come on stream with a system appropriate to it, gathering data that was appropriate to the service. And those bits of information don't necessarily speak to one another. Those bits of the organisation fundamentally don't talk to one another, even though you may, for example, have to come to the recruitment team and present your passport to show your eligibility to work in the UK. But having done so, you may then find there's another service offered by the council which will require you to then come and present your passport, whether that's eligibility for particular benefits or whatever. So, you know, that's, again, a crude example of the sort of thing, the sort of duplication of effort which can be eradicated, hopefully, further down the line by going back to the drawing board, essentially. But we're a bit beyond the drawing board now, and today I'm pleased to bring to Cabinet a roadmap which will take us further along on the journey towards delivering that better service for residents. So among the key things which we have in this roadmap is establishing a sort of discovery piece around which services are most suitable for our attention. First of all, we can't do everything at once, although fundamentally our goal is to rethink everything. So the starting point is to analyse what we do, and part of the problem of having all these independent systems within the council is that council officers don't necessarily know how things are done in another part of the organisation. They're using completely different information systems, sometimes to deliver very similar pieces of information. And yet, you know, when you look at the 4.13 on page 96, it distills what we do, what most of these services do, down to 10 common functions, which are to view it, to report it and sort it, to apply for it, to book it, to pay for it, to receive it, to check it, to appeal it, to change it and amend it, or to tell us about it. And so if you think of our functions as those 10 key things, it becomes a lot easier to find those synergies. And that's the role that you know, we will be tasking the business analysts, which we are aiming to recruit to undertake this discovery piece for us, to just look at the way we do things. And as I said at the start, doing it from the perspective of the resident, how the resident would expect to receive those services. So obviously at 11.4 we talk about the recruitment of those business analysts, and then we move on to the various functions which are proposed to be reviewed first of all, and that's on your appendix 1, that's at page 105, and there's also some indication of the sort of strain that they put on a telephone customer service function in terms of, for example, you know, household waste recycling bookings amounting to nearly 3,000 phone calls, when that's something that, you know, clearly could be done differently and more efficiently from a resident's perspective. And it's the role of these business analysts to go through these functions set out at Appendix 1 and discover which of those are best placed to deliver improvements from a resident's perspective, and that can also and must also deliver some sort of saving for us all as council taxpayers. So it's a win-win situation in terms of delivering a better service, delivering key savings for council taxpayers, and I open the floor up to members for discussion.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. A comprehensive, but very, very helpful overview, absolutely. And I think before I open the floor, Appendix 1 in particular is fascinating. You know, that information, you know, again, being really open and transparent. There are other councils to get that information. Hard-working journalists would have to put in FOIs. We're being open and transparent. We're saying this is what the public want to talk to us about. So, again, I would reiterate your thanks to Paul and the team. I will make some other comments before I come back to you. Teresa, please.
Thank you, Alex. And I think that your fresh eyes on this has been very beneficial, actually, because it's something that we've been talking about for a long time. I wanted to draw attention to page 109 and 10, and that is the 15 principles of good design that are being applied to this work, because it's actually important. We haven't invented them. They're developed by Lou Down from the School of Good Services, and our staff are going to be faithful to them. I've been clear that in adult social care, we need the many complex systems and variations that staff have to deal with every day to work for them, not work for an IT developer who thinks that they know everything, but to work for the people who are using these systems on the front line, so that it will be, you know, sitting together, working through, using the principles of good design to make sure that the changes we make are the ones that are worth making and will make a difference to the people using the services. And I draw people to the 15th principle on page 110, which says, makes it easy to get human assistance. That a service should always provide an easy route for someone to speak to a human being if they need to. And I don't want anyone to forget that. You know, I know that we've got very different uses of technology across the Medway towns. There's more we can do, and I hope that in time, you know, we'll be able to have a bit of a road show to work with the voluntary sector and show people how these services are going to work for them, so they're not scared or worried about the technology, and there may be a need in the future to invest in technology and in broadband to actually make these things work. We will understand that as we go. But to have those principles of good design, a principled approach to changing things that works for people and understands all our glorious imperfections and foibles, I think it is really important. And I'm pleased that that's got a high profile in the report, Alex.
Thank you, Teresa. Simon?
Yeah, thanks very much, and thank you, Alex, and to the whole team. I mean, I was involved in some of the early discussions a year ago with Paul and the rest of the team when Tris was taking this on, and to see where it is now is really exciting. I think one of the underlying, I mean, I was going to raise the issue of the 15 principles, and you read through this, and some of it's quite philosophical, and I find that quite exciting. Often with computer systems, it's either an add-on to what you've got and you hope it works, which eventually it stops working. We've seen that in banking systems and other systems as well, where you just literally add on another system and hope that they talk to each other, and then you find that they don't talk to each other and you have to live and work with it. Or a company comes in and delivers you something that you've got to change the whole way you work in order to work with their system. This is a different approach. This is looking at what we want to do, and at the heart of it, I think Teresa highlighted it, and so did you, Alex, is about accessibility. My 87-year-old father-in-law does everything through his iPad. His banking, council access, so everything, his health, everything through his iPad. Another 87-year-old guy next door was probably relying on the phone or relying on somebody to call round, a care worker or something to help him. And this provides all of that in the package, because instead of looking at the system, it looks at the individual resident and what their needs are. And that's that approach, that single view of the council, actually recognising that every single resident in Medway is different from the next one, but they all need to access the same services. And that makes that happen. And particularly in my area of frontline services, we're looking at that whole gamut of things, whether it's the rubbish hasn't been collected, or there's a tree falling over, or there's a footpath that needs, whatever it is, all those things, suddenly it becomes a lot easier for everybody to access it in the way that suits them the best. So this is a really welcome process. The road map is taking us in the right direction. And I think it's quite courageous of us as a council to do this, and I think it's going to work. And I think we're kind of at the forefront here. Other councils will follow our lead on this. So thank you.
Thank you. Zoe, please.
Yes, I'd just like to give credit to the cab service, who are the first point of contact for many of our customers, with a myriad of requests that they deal with and communicate on to other departments in the council, and deal with those very quickly and appropriately.
Thank you. Nina, please.
First of all, thank you to the officers for this brilliant report. It is very thorough, and I really welcome the underpinning principles for the roadmap as well. But I just wanted to find out a little bit more about the quality assurance process in terms of how we evaluate where we are, etc. Because if we are, and also I would like to welcome the simplified design for residents and partners and staff members alike. There's nothing not to like there. Just wanting a little bit of clarity around the quality assurance process.
Thank you. I can't see any other members, so before I come back to Alex, this is a really important piece of work. And it is right to, in your first couple of sentences, highlight what it's not. Because I do think the name sometimes gives that level of confusion. There will be changes to technology, that is part of it. But it's changing how we do things. I've seen too many examples over the last 17 years. And to be fair to the previous administration, often not their fault, actually, where we've spent, in some cases, millions of pounds on an IT system to have to come back to say, actually, because the IT system, they're making changes to it, and we've got this other IT system, we've now got to invest another X hundreds of thousands of pounds in improving or upgrading, which is unacceptable. So I think trying to get to that position where, and we'll never truly get to a one Medway IT system, but if we can get closer to it, that's got to help. Nina raises a really interesting point, and actually I wouldn't want to lose sight of the fourth recommendation, which is around the member user testing group. I think, which is a kind of distant cousin of the former member user group, or MUGs. Maybe we were for turning up. But I think actually the change of focus on this to say actually very explicitly, this is about testing before we go live, and doing that on a cross-party basis is, I think, the right thing. I certainly welcome that, and I suspect the group whips will be looking carefully at this as we move forward to deliver this. Teresa is absolutely right when it comes to the fact of those Venn diagrams. And if I think about the 59 councillors we have as a snapshot of the 285,000 residents, there will definitely be a handful of councillors going, I'm purely analogue. I want my CD. That's fine. There'll be other people going, I'm downloading it yesterday, thank you very much. And lots of other people in the middle. And that's okay. You know, some residents will be frustrated because the technology we have isn't as good as Amazon or Virgin Trains, other train companies, and shops are available. Some pay their tax. So from that perspective, I do think it is really positive that we're bringing members along this journey so that they can have confidence, so when they're speaking to their residents, they're not hearing it for the first time. They've seen it, they've fed in to improve it. So I think that's all very, very good. So yeah, absolutely strong support for me. This is important on a number of levels, and the 4 recommendations that you're moving, I wholeheartedly support. Alex, back to you.
Thanks, colleagues. Some really interesting points raised there. And just to go back to what Vince said about, you know, maybe we'll never get to a point of having sort of a one Medway approach. I'm more ambitious in terms of this project than that. I think that one of the principles of good design is also that you don't notice it. Good design just works, and it's just there, and it's instinctive. And so I hope that even if there are, you know, like the sort of Richard Scarry books of old, where you had all sorts of complex operations happening behind the scenes in sort of pipe work and sort of industrial complexes. Actually, you know, at the front end, those processes will be hidden from view from residents. So, you know, 87-year-olds on their iPad will be no more disadvantaged than someone making contact on the phone if that's their accessibility need. So I think what we do need to remember is the challenge of this, and I've heard this analogy used in relation to the incoming government trying to fix the myriad problems they've encountered, is that they're having to build the plane while flying the plane. And I think there's a similar analogy you use here. It's almost like we are flying the plane while building a better plane inside the other plane, and at some point the new plane will take over the controls. I'm maybe pushing that analogy just a little bit too far. But what I would say is that, you know, this is something we're encountering as an authority in 2024. In my previous professional life as a newspaper journalist, this is something that I encountered, that sort of fundamental systemic transformational, generational change happened a decade and a half ago in a lot of newspapers. I'm old enough, maybe I don't look at it as, you know, very good sunscreen perhaps, but when I started my career in journalism, we literally had a dark room. We literally took films from cameras to the dark room from being out on a job. And I've seen the newsroom transform into something completely different. That became an imaging suite, and there were these sort of little iterations that came along the way. But you were working within quite a strict structure. You were sort of dealing with Fleet Street operatives who you would still talk about as not a deadline, but as being off stone on time. And you thought, well, what's the stone? And then someone would explain to you the arcane sort of origins of some of these phrases. That's where we are with all of these council services, and they're really complex. It's a complex operation, much more complex, dare I say it, than a newspaper. And so that is the challenge that we face. But I do understand it. I've been involved in it before. I was part of a project team which actually helped deliver that transformational change in our newspaper. So I do understand the problems, and I think that's where the answer to Nina's question about how we assure the quality of this, I do think that member user group is absolutely critical to that process, and I've been clear in discussions already around the makeup of that group, that it has to be representative. It can't just be whiz kids who know how to use the tech and can embarrass their parents by what they can do with the technology. This is about making sure that people of all abilities and none, people with accessibility requirements. I'm really keen that this project takes on board some of the amazing work that's been done in our community. I know that sort of digital accessibility is a cause célèbre for a lot of great community activists, people in my area like John Portman, also Paul Wells, who come at it from a sort of a disability perspective. So I think it's really important that however we develop this user group, that it takes on board some of the learnings from those people, because we have so much to learn and make them at the centre of what we do. Because if someone with the least ability or the greatest challenge is able to use it, that's good, because that means everyone else can do it too. So that's who we want to target this at. Everybody. It's no mean feat. And I think that finally, just the fact that at the end of all of that, there still has to be that access to a human being. This isn't about the computer saying no. This isn't about us developing a clever way to dodge accountability. It's the opposite of that. As Vince has said, this is about being really transparent about the processes that we think are best suited to this scheme and this discovery piece, and about why that need is there, and about the opportunities that it presents. So I think that there is everything to be optimistic about, and genuinely nothing to fear from any man, woman or child in Medway about how they interact with the council. I do hope that things can only get better.
Thank you very much, Alex, and it's helpful to get this report, and I'm sure we'll have further reports. There might be some turbulence, and I look forward to the report where we are storing away tray tables and putting on seatbelts. That is the end of the airplane analogy. Are colleagues happy to support the 4 recommendations as laid out in the paper? Thank you very much. Let's move on to a slightly different part of Alex's portfolio, adoption of a street naming and numbering policy. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Vince. And this is another aspect of, keeping up with modern developments. We've certainly moved on from the days of when the only people who needed to know your address were the carrier pigeons. Or, that's really important that we have a street naming and numbering policy that keeps up with modern requirements, whether that's the need for emergency services to quickly find a property and get there to save lives or fight crime, or just the straightforward aspects of the sort of interactions you might have on other websites where you type in your postcode and you hope that your address will come up nice and quickly. Those sort of modern developments do present challenges, so I would highlight in the report that there are some principles in terms of the naming of streets which probably are a bit of an anathema to me as a former sub-editor, and the dropping of apostrophes might make some people's teeth set on edge, but I happen to live at an address which I think contravenes at least 3 of the principles of this new policy. But this isn't about righting those wrongs, it's about making sure that going forward that we as new citizens move into new developments in Medway, that they are spared the difficulty of, did I put an apostrophe in my address or didn't I, and whether that comes up. And also clarifies some of the issues around the process of naming of naming of streets around after famous people or other individuals. So that's also part of what is set out in the report, and I welcome comments from colleagues.
Thank you very much indeed. Alex Llewellyn, please.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks, Vince. I just want to say, as a Gillingham councillor, now with a portfolio for housing in particular, I'm personally pleased to note the exemption process that is available within the policy to exempt the 20-year reflection period for nomination following the death of a person who's been recognised in Medway for outstanding service to its communities. And that is all. I don't know if I should say any more. As a Gillingham councillor, particularly connected to Twiddle. Thank you.
If you wanted to expand, I'm very happy if you'd like to expand, Llewellyn.
Only because obviously our own Alderman Paul Harriott has done so much for Twiddle and Gillingham in terms of housing and the community in general, and should be recognised. So this 20-year exemption reflection period being waived on application would mean quite a lot to us. A great deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Llewellyn. I've got Simon and then Nina.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the report, Alex, and for the team that's put this together. It might sound a bit of a flippant comment, but actually there's a seriousness behind what I want to say, and that is about the logical approach to new housing estates in particular. Missing number 13 from a lot of old housing estates is quite annoying, because when you're walking along canvassing, you suddenly find that there's a number not there that you thought was there, that kind of thing. But I think there's a serious point behind there. We've all been through a lot of elections in the last couple of years, cross-party. I'm not just talking about ourselves in this room today, but also where you get lost because you cannot find the next number to the house. So it's an appeal to our new developers coming into Medway within our new local plan and all the housing that's being talked about that's coming our way over the next 50 years. Please make the numbering logical and approachable and accessible. I mean, and Alex made the point about the emergency vehicles, knowing where to go and stuff like that. Maybe there's a role for what 3 words or an equivalent website attached to every house or something like that, which would make things much easier to follow. So it's just a little appeal. And just on the wider picture, again, that goes to the design of the estates themselves. And this is an appeal. We've had a number of meetings with the development companies in the last few weeks around our local plan consultation, talking to them as well as residents in Medway about what their views on the development of Medway is. But it's about making those new estates accessible for waste vehicles, for buses and for everything else, and much more walking and cycling friendly as well. So I just thought I'd throw that in at the end. But yes, more logic to the numbering, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Nina?
I do welcome the transparent framework with clear guidance and decision-making to reduce the risk of inappropriate names being used at the same time. When I was the mayor of Medway last year, I came across so many Medway heroes that have actually gone on to make such big impact out in the world. Makes us ever so proud to be Medway. So I think if there are opportunities, new developments where we can actually pay appropriate tribute to our Medway heroes, then hopefully some names will be named after our Medway heroes and champions.
Thank you, Nina. Before I come back to Alex, a couple of thoughts from my perspective. I'm very supportive of this. I think this is a good policy. I want to thank David Holloway in particular for the work he's done on this. He's a fantastic council officer. Luella is right. One of the driving forces behind why this has come forward, particularly with paragraph 9, was the fact that at the moment, without these changes in place, any recognition of anyone who passed away this year, in theory, nothing could happen till 2044 or 2054, because I think currently it's 30 years. So I do really recognise the positivity around the exemptions. And of course, that will sit with us. It will be subject to call-in. So if other individuals on the council are not happy with the decision we take one way or another, it will be subject to that democratic accountability. It's not exempt from that in any particular way, but again, we'll be open and transparent on that. I want to recognise actually the work that Harinder did with the cross-party task group looking at the naming, initially the naming of a car park. He led that, contrary to what at least one piece of theatre seemed to indicate. But during that conversation, of course, the well-documented road in Wayfield and Weedswood of Starlin Avenue came up. And again, if you look at the neighbouring roads, at the time that that estate was built, you know, Eden, Alamein, Churchill, you know, there was a logic at that point for the people who were building that development. Of course, that's not the case now, but actually the process of attempting, as is laid out here, to rename a street is incredibly expensive and inconvenient. We've not had a call from the public to do that, but it certainly was a conversation I know that cross-party task group did consider. And then just the final thing as a ward councillor, there are still some really difficult kind of exceptions we have in our community at the moment. So you're right to highlight apostrophes, saints and saints and all of that. And the worst example in Chatham Central and Brompton is on All Saints Gardens. So there is, and the roads there are all named after the wards, with one exception, which is Melbourne Road, which there was an existing Melbourne Road, the other side of the perimeter brick wall. So you've now got an example of one road in Chatham Central, which has the same postcode with a massive wall in the middle of it. So a few residents there did say, can we look to change that? But again, actually changing something like a postcode is an incredibly expensive process. So I think there'll be residents looking on at this to say, actually, can we make sure that the stuff we build in the future, and All Saints Gardens is relatively new, as an example, we need to make sure we don't have another example like that in the future, and this policy will definitely help that. So I'm very pleased that you've brought this forward. Teresa, and then back to Alex.
It's just a tiny little plea, because overall I absolutely support the policy. The design of the, particularly the street plates, is consistent across Medway, because I think that that's important, that we perhaps need to do a little work on that and think about what we would like. And while we're doing that, we have got a lot of street plates now in very poor condition. There are streets that have got the old street plate hanging up because you can't read it anymore, but it's still there, and the new one next to it. There are some where it's difficult to read them, and I appreciate, you know, there's a resource question here, but I wouldn't like people who are living in streets now, including Starlin Avenue, if you're out there, to think that we neglect them. You know, we've got a policy here that's about the future, but people who are living here now deserve to, you know, be proud of the road that they live in and make sure that it's visible and accessible to everyone in the way, Simon, that you've been talking about.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Alex, back to you to sum up.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. I wholeheartedly agree. This is putting making it clear that the powers that communities have to take these decisions and make these representations. And I'm sure that they will. Totally agree on the idea of consistent street signage. I think that's the sort of thing that when you look at cities like London or Birmingham, where they have quite distinctive road signs, street signs, that almost becomes the sort of vernacular design becomes a source of local pride, and I think that's the other opportunity that this policy presents, is to increase that sense of local pride. It's not about rewriting history if we find something unsavoury about an individual who's had a street named after them, but it does present those opportunities if people have a strong opinion like that. But also, on a day when we have a Medway Olympian achieving such great success, it's good to know that what the process would be if these things were to be celebrated, and also just to sort of point out that the other things which somewhat amusing, where you look at 6.118, where you have street names which may be open to reinterpretation by graffiti or shortening. So there's all sorts of things to consider, and this is one for the thick of it fans. But who could forget the time when Nicola Murray went to support Liam Bentley in the Leamington by-election and had a rather unfortunate incident with certain obscured letters. So we can all see the circumstances as they arise, but hopefully we can look at these things and foresee them and deal with them. What we can't foresee is a situation where a borough of Chatham and a borough of Rochester could come up with two Maidstone roads within a very short distance from each other and require residents to always clarify exactly which one they're talking about. That's the sort of practicalities that we can avoid with a consistent policy. So I recommend adopting this policy.
Thank you very much. I'm sure it's the Raynham Maidstone Road they're probably talking about. Are colleagues happy to support those recommendations? Thank you very much. Over then to Luella for Regulator of Social Housing Consumer Standards. Luella, over to you.
Thank you, Vince. This report sets out some of the most significant changes to the social housing sector in recent years and provides detail in relation to how the Regulator of Social Housing will regulate in line with its published consumer standards. The report sets out some of the improvements made by the Council in anticipation of the new standards, including changes to the capacity and structure of the housing team, improvements to the way that planned works are managed, work undertaken to secure contractors for repair and specialist compliancy work, the reshaping of resident engagement work, plans to improve areas where satisfaction is lower than we would expect, and proactive work to identify and treat damp and mould. The Regulator of Social Housing makes it clear that landlords should be aiming to meet the standard, and even where they are meeting the standard, they must strive for continuous improvement of services provided to residents so that they live in homes provided by the council and they just generally have a better experience. Medway Council has been selected for a planned inspection in Q2 of the new inspection regime. I think that's a good point to put it out actually for comment if anyone has anything.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got Teresa.
Thank you, Luella, and thanks for the enthusiasm that you've shown with the teams on getting this going, because it is something new, and we're a bit regulator heavy at the council at the moment, but it's great to see that you're rising to the challenge with your leadership. And I think, we support this because it's about driving up standards. And as you've said there, it's a chance actually to showcase some of the work that's been going on in our housing department to drive up standards and to be proactive and not wait for things to go wrong. And I hope that, some of our partners who are registered providers are listening and want to get involved in that. And I know you've got intentions and have been already involved in the Big Door Knock, for example, a fantastic initiative to go around and talk directly to tenants, ask them how they're getting on and identify problems and, before things get into a situation where people feel that they can't cope with it. So I look forward to hearing what the regulator's got to say. I know, like with all of the work that we're doing, to make sure that we answer the demands of regulators. This is extra work for our staff, but it is an opportunity to show how we're already keen on driving up standards, and I know that the new government are wanting to do that as well. There was a lot spoken about today about, you know, driving away damp and mould in older properties, in council properties, and particularly in the private sector as well. Something for us in the future to tackle even harder than we do now.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Any other colleague? Before I come back to you, Luella, I would wholeheartedly agree with Teresa on your hitting the ground running. You know, the fact that you are a new portfolio holder and this inspection is coming in Q2. I know you've had a lot of engagement. I know you had a good handover with Nashaba as well. I think that's important to say. I think the service is in a better place than it was 15 months ago, and it wasn't in a bad place 15 months ago. Let me emphasise that. But I think there's been improvements on our watch, and I think actually some of the things, you know, sometimes it's quite practical things, but actually having 2 or 3 smaller maintenance contracts rather than one large maintenance contract, I think was the right decision, which is why I supported it. So I think those things are good. And as Teresa rightfully says, and as I said at full council earlier in the month, we welcome inspections. It's a good thing. We're proud of what we do here. We know that we're not perfect. No local authority is perfect. No registered social housing provider is perfect. But actually, the inspections will be a good opportunity to highlight what's going well and where we can make even more improvements to support those residents in their homes. We know we're a proud council. We're a proud landlord as well. And I think we do a good job of that. And just finally, before I hand back to you, Luella, Teresa, you're absolutely right on the announcements made today by Angela Rayner. We've spoken both in opposition and as the administration on the tragic circumstances that were happening elsewhere in the country. And now that we've confirmed we will bring forward AWAB's law, you know, that will be I think, a clear indication that people should have a level of expectation that their home is not making them ill. And so I think you can see already from the Labour government a priority, which is something this council, certainly in the last 14 and 15 months under our administration, has been prioritising, making sure that we do all that we can to support those who not only call us their council, but their landlord as well. Luella, back to you.
Thank you, and I agree completely with the words about the team, actually, because as a new portfolio holder, I've come in, I've had a handover from my predecessor, Nashaba Khan, and I've had a great deal of support from a very hard-working housing team led by Mark, and they literally put in everything into this because it's important, because we want to improve the social housing we have. We are an authority who has social housing. I'm proud of the social housing we've got, and I think the team are putting every effort in to make sure that the people who live there have the best conditions they can have. So I look forward to highlighting the good work that Medway is undertaking and working with the team and the regulator to address any areas of improvement. And yeah, once again, I want to thank the team for the work they're doing. They produced a huge range of documentation in readiness for the regulator to visit us in September. And all this hard work is with, at heart, the improvement of improving people's quality of life for the place they live and call home. So I'd ask Cabinet to note the report.
Thank you very much, Luella. Is that noted? Thank you. Let's move on to item 11, the Housing Revenue Account, or HRA, performance for 23-24. Luella, back to you.
So this report provides a comprehensive review of the performance of the HRA landlord services over the last financial year. There's a significant amount of information held within the appendix of the report. However, it draws attention to the following areas. a reduction in satisfaction with repairs undertaken by our contractor Mears. This is primarily caused by a failed recruitment of members to their customer care team, and that has been addressed through the secondment of staff from another one of their branches. September will see the commencement of a suite of new contracts with refreshed KPIs influenced by resident engagement, with strong social value commitments that will be overseen by the Council in collaboration with our residents. The report provides an update on our statutory compliance, and we have a positive performance overall. Our positive performance overall was impacted by performance against asbestos, which was at just under 73%. This was caused by re-inspection delays due to contractor resourcing and plans that have been put in place to rectify any further delays. The report sets out details about how much we know about our own housing stock. Visits and assessments to our properties is the best way for us to understand their condition. So we can see for ourselves the state of play with each property. The report highlights the various work undertaken to assess the conditions of homes and shows the stock condition surveys remain to be an area of improvement. However, numerous other visits are put in place to understand that homes are safe, decent, and also where investment is needed. Details showing the Council's proactive approach to damp and mould is reflected by showing how we call on tenants to ask if there are any issues. Every time there's a gas safety check, the tenants are asked about damp and mould. And we also ask tenants during those big door knocks that you mentioned, Teresa. The report also covers the results of our first formal collection of tenant satisfaction measures. This was introduced as law for the Council to collect and return to the Regulator as part of the new initiatives in May last year. That's all I can say about that actually at the moment. Just to ask you to note the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Luella. Again, a substantial amount of information in there. Simon, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, Luella, for the report, and a huge thanks to the team who put this together. This is a lot of work, and there's a lot of information to pick up on. So I just wanted to highlight one issue which I feel is really important, and that's the section 11 of the main report on page 168, which is called Knowing Our Stock and Decent Homes. I think that's so important in any kind of estate management. There's lessons to be learned here of how to do it right. The figures there make it quite clear. The stock at the end of March 2024 was 94.8% compliant against the Decent Home Standards. That's a really good achievement in anybody's book. And even then you've highlighted the point that we're trying to be better than that, actually. So it's always a way of looking at where it works. And as we build our housing stock, which we are in the process of doing, this is a really, pardon the pun, or perhaps not so pardon, the firm foundation on which to do it, because it's really working and it's working well. It can improve, and we are looking at improvements, but all the time we know it really has got a solid base. So just knowing our stock and decent homes, I think is a really good way of describing what's happening in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. Any other colleague? Not back to you, Luella.
Yeah, it's just, I agree, Simon. The idea that we know about every single property is of utmost importance, because you can't fix any issues if you don't know what's going on there. So I completely agree with that. No further comments to add, just to note the report.
Thank you very much. Is that noted? Thank you. Then let's move on to the third of the Luella Prenter trilogy, activity of the Housing Revenue Account Governance Group. Luella, over to you.
Thank you, Vince. This report provides an update to the Cabinet in relation to the activity of the HRA Governance Group. The group provides the core governance of the Housing Revenue Account, and it involves Cabinet members, 2 Cabinet members, an opposition member, and representatives from the tenant and leaseholder panel, and also senior officers from the Council. The report details the information considered by the group and future changes that will be more closely aligned to the group, to the consumer standards published by the Regulator, which we mentioned previously.
Thank you very much, Luella. Any colleague? Simon?
Yep, just quickly come in on again a point. I'm a member of this group, so I really enjoy the meetings, actually, because one of the key things is about the partnership with the community, and that is really a lesson for the other registered providers to learn from how we engage with our tenants and residents, and how we look after their interests and give them a voice in the whole process is key. And so all the work being done to achieve that is in this, and it's really good to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And I would agree. I sat on a variation of this many years ago, chaired by, in my role as leader of the opposition. And again, hearing directly from residents, I think, is something which this council is good at, and I think we should be rightly proud of that. We always want to hear from residents. We'll always go far beyond the statutory minimum for consultation and engagement, and there's a good example of that here with the work that's been carried out and continues to be carried out. Luella, back to you.
Yeah, totally agree, Vince and Simon. Having tenants as part of the group is very important, because you need to hear the people that live there, what they think. So I agree completely. And I'd just like to ask Cabinet to note the report.
Thank you, colleagues. Is that noted? Thank you very much indeed. And Luella, thanks again for all of your work in this particular area as we move towards the forthcoming inspection. Let's then move on to item 13, which is in my name. This is around some specific changes around procurement for health-based services. This is quite a technical report, so I'll move the recommendations as laid out. Say from my perspective, this is pretty straightforward in ensuring that we are legally compliant, but also making sure that wherever practically possible, particularly within the thresholds laid out in recommendation 1 of 3, that there's clarity for any potential individual or organisation putting forward for procurement in the health area. This is separate from other procurement processes. This is not setting a rule for anything else within the council, but specifically health-based services, which of course we do procure particularly, but not exclusively, public health, but also of course elements of social care as well. Happy to open up to any colleague. Teresa, please. Yep.
Just quickly, this is an important report, although it's a technical report, because it protects the probity of services that are not necessarily having to go out to competitive tender. So it's important to say that, and that technical work has been done so that providers internally and externally have very clear guidelines about what's expected for them, and actually that services can be worked up through co-design as much as they can be worked up through competition.
Thank you very much indeed, Teresa. I can't see any other colleague, therefore I'll move the recommendations as laid out. Are those agreed? Thank you. Then move on to item number 14, the Broadside office lease renewal. Remind colleagues there are blue papers. I don't expect us to have to move into closed session, but if you do wish to, please indicate now. No, that's helpful. Zoe, over to you. Thank you.
Okay. This is a question of the renewal of the Broadside office lease, which expires on the 5th of August. And there is delegated authority to the director to place it in consultation with the portfolio holder to sign and execute the new lease on the best terms reasonably available as set out. This is to ensure suitable office accommodation for children's services, and as the value of the lease is in excess of £20,000 per annum and beyond officer and portfolio holder delegated limits, so it's a matter for Cabinet to agree. Notice has already been served under section 26 to request the renewal, because the date for renewal is almost upon us, and this includes a 3-month rent free for 8 weeks, I believe. So I'm seeking support for the proposal.
Thank you very much. Teresa?
Yeah, just to say thank you for that, Zoe, and for the expediency that officers are showing, that this is a position that we find ourselves in, that in the future, you know, we hope that things will be different, but we're grateful that this accommodation is available. And the rent-free period is because there will be a short period of time when Broadside is being refurbished and our staff will have to move out. So arrangements are being made, even with all the difficulties at Gun Wharf, accordingly. And I know that if Adam and Tracy were here, they would want to add their thanks to you, Zoe, and to officers for making this happen as quickly as possible, including the alternative continuity arrangements.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Any other colleague on that? No. I mean, I would echo Teresa's comments. I mean, we are in a unique set of circumstances. I think when we took control of the council last May, we had some pretty grand plans as to try and move our property portfolio around pretty quickly, move out of offices that perhaps we're currently in. Of course, last October changed all of that. So from that perspective, that's why I support where we are with this lease renewal. Zoe, back to you.
Straightforward request to approve this so that we can continue using this facility for those services.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. That takes us to the next item, which is around the Regional Care Co-Operative. In Adam's absence, Teresa is going to move both this item and the next item because they are linked. So, Teresa, over to you for the Regional Care Co-Operative.
So thank you, Vince. And as you've said, in Adam's absence, this is an important report because it gives us the ability to work across boundary when we're finding accommodation, particularly for looked after children. And increasingly, this has become a critical area of work where we have seen across the country private providers falling into disrepute with the care that they offer to children. And obviously, we want to make sure that the children, our children, my children, and your children around the table, our looked after children, have the very best accommodation that we can offer them. So Cabinet are being asked to agree that we join the Pathfinder and enter into relevant discussions and collaborations with the Department for Education and other local authorities when it's appropriate to do so. And we're delegating authority to the Director of People and the Deputy Chief Executive in consultation with the portfolio holder to finalise any agreements that we enter into. And that we'll get a further report later in the year. We've already had some work on this from you, Leanne, as an advocate and champion of this work. And so later in the year, when more detailed information is available, we'll receive another report on the project.
Thank you very much. Any colleague on this? Before I come back to you, Teresa, and move to the vote, I mean, I think there is a logic to this, and I think in part, for me, this is about local government collectively frankly disrupting the market a bit. We have been, you know, we will always put children at the heart of what we do. As Ofsted rightfully said, children matter in Medway. Unfortunately, to some organisations that we deal with, children matter to their bottom line. So anything that we can do, you know, working as a local government family, and it would be absolutely illogical to not be on that list with every other council that's named in Appendix A, to make sure that we're getting value for money, that we're sharing ideas, resources, etc., I think is a very good thing. And from a very practical perspective, if we don't agree this item, then we can't spend the money we're going to spend in the next item. Therefore, for that reason alone, I will be supporting this, but for many, many other reasons as well. And I know both Tracy and Adam have been kept very closely informed and working with officers on this. Teresa, back to you.
Thank you, Vincent. And just to assure people, there will be a very careful market oversight regime to make sure that this doesn't run out of control. And frankly, if we don't join what is effectively a collective, as Vince said, to cause a bit of market disruption and actually show some leadership in terms of what we expect on quality for children, then we won't have access to the resources that come along with it, because the South East region is a Pathfinder project that has already been promised funding, and it's not funding, for the avoidance of doubt, that anyone has taken away. That funding is there because it's regarded as a critical part of the service that we provide to children. So with that then, I ask everybody, please, to agree the recommendations laid out at 1.1 to 1.3.
Thank you very much. Those agreed? Thank you. Let's move on to the final agenda item of tonight, redevelopment of Aut Even. And again, in Adam's absence, Teresa, thank you. You've agreed to move this.
So distilling, as Vince has just said, what was said in the previous item down to a very local situation, you're being asked tonight to agree and progress with the development of Aut Even as a specialist 5-bedroom home for young people with learning disabilities, autism and neurodiversity at a cost of approaching £1.2 million. This will be recommended to full council that the redevelopment is added to the capital programme, and that means that it will get the DFE Regional Care Grant, and there will be a virement from the Children's Assessment Unit scheme in the existing capital programme. So part of it will be funded from our own capital programme. And again, asking for delegation to the Director of People and the Deputy Chief Executive to enter into any legal agreements. And just to emphasise, you know, this specialist residential provision is incredibly important. We've got a high number of neurodiverse children in Medway, and it will give us much needed high quality local capacity, which means that they'll be able to stay here in Medway, close to their families, and even in some cases move back from other areas. So it will actually be very much an investor save project as it comes to its conclusion.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Any colleague? No, I mean, I think this, thank goodness we agreed the last item, because we're spending that grant, and we're spending it in a very wise way. As we said earlier on, with the financial challenges we have, finding good quality spend to save items and programs is a good thing to do. But actually, even if this wasn't the case of making ultimately a financial saving longer term, this is a better outcome for some of our most very vulnerable children and their families. So whether you've got a heart or a calculator or both, you should be supporting this. And most people around this table definitely have both with the circumstances we find ourselves in. So I'm very, very happy to support this. Teresa, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Vincent, and thank you to everybody. You know, this is going to be a really fantastic facility with enhanced sensory and therapeutic facilities. There'll be a hydrotherapy room to support therapeutic needs, a sensory room, and this is for some of the most complex children in Medway. But it does mean that their start in life and their journey towards adulthood will be actually much smoother than if they have to go out of area. And having a place like this to go as a child massively increases their chances of becoming successful adults who can become more independent as they grow through and come through our own transition processes. And you know, people around the table will long be aware that one of our most persistent and pervasive costs is the cost of out-of-area placements. So being able to make this investment, have children nearer to their families, nearer to the area they know, is incredibly important, and it will bring very direct benefits for some of our most needy children.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, is that agreed? Thank you. Obviously, the final decision on that will sit with Council in October. That concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you very much indeed.